Good afternoon. I'm Steve Lowry, the editor of The High Low. Today we are with filmmaker Eli Daughdrill, whose new film Faith comes out today, Friday. Eli is also the chair of what could be called the film department at Long Beach City College. Before we get to Eli, let's talk about me. I'm an arts editor, okay? And as an arts editor, people send you books that they've written, and they send you CDs. And they maybe send you gallery openings of things they painted. And locally, if you see this stuff, it can be pretty good. It can be really good at times because all it requires is a person with a brush or a person with a laptop or a person with a microphone. But we also get people who send us films they make, local filmmakers, and they make them for a few $1,000s. And when we get these, normally we say, well, that's nice. Good for you. Good try. Here you go. Because it requires an incredible amount of time, effort, people, and most maybe of all, money to make the kind of film that you expect to see on Amazon Prime, on Netflix, or perhaps even one day in a theater. Who knows? That is why when I saw Eli's new film, Faith, 5 minutes in, I was stunned by what I saw. Faith is simply one of the best films I've seen this year. Not one of the best independent films I've seen this year, not one of the best locally produced films I've seen this year. It is one of the best. In fact, Eli, I want to be honest with you, I kept waiting for it to fall down because this film was made for $200,000, which is what, that doesn't even pay for a couple days of catered fare at a big budget Hollywood film. Congratulations. It is a fantastic movie.
Thank you.
It is fantastic, Eli, I would say, because every step of the way, it seems you refuse to let this film go the way we normally think a film is going to go. You know what I mean? We watch films with other films in our mind, and your film never does that. It just goes its own way. You are the writer-director of Faith. Can we begin at the beginning? How does this film become an idea in your head?
It comes from my background. So I grew up in a small town in Central California. I grew up an evangelical Christian, and as I've sort of come into adulthood and sort of moved away from that, it was naturally something that I was interested in as a filmmaker, trying to tell a story about that place and that community. So I sat down and wrote a script about it 10 years ago, believe it or not. So it was a tiny movie that cost $200,000, which is tiny by movie standards. Still took me 10 years to get it made.
How long did it take you to write it?
I mean, the first draft of it, I wrote very quickly, but I did multiple drafts of it. It was over the course of years that I wrote multiple drafts of it. You just continually doing it. And I started working with a producer, and we would do he would give me notes and I would do drafts on that. But the first draft of it was a couple weeks.
This, I think, is a classic character study. I mean, as far as plot goes, there's very little plot. There's something catastrophic happens in the beginning, everything goes off that. But I mean, again, having been trained by Hollywood, we're waiting for the big explosion. It never comes. How does a script like that look? Do you find yourself when you're doing it like, oh, maybe I better give him a big dance number here or something like that? Did you have to guard against that with yourself?
I mean, you do a little bit, but like, there's also the thing of like your taste. You know, what are the things that you like, and what are the things that you respond to? And I try to listen to that as much as possible. And I've always liked smaller, slower films that are less oriented around plot and are more oriented around people and their humanity and that sort of stuff. So there's the things that you're interested in. I think that you have to listen to that and sort of follow that. Certainly anybody, and myself included, it's very easy to, like, especially making a film like this, there's not too many people in Hollywood who are interested in making a film like this. And so that, well, do I need to add something like that? Do we need to change something? Do we need to have something more dramatic or bigger twists and turns and all that sort of stuff?
Without giving anything away that would ruin it for someone watching it the first time, can you kind of just give the basic plot of what happens in Faith?
So it's about a guy who's a farmer in Central California who's deeply religious, and something tragic happens, and that sort of throws his whole worldview out of balance, and his life starts to sort of fall apart because of it, and it becomes a kind of existential quest, I guess, or existential search. If he's going to be able to sort of put his life back together and find his identity again, because his belief system is so central to who he is.
The film itself, as I said, there is a major, I guess you would call this plot point early on, about 5 minutes into the film.
Mm-hmm.
After that, there really isn't. The film, I would say, is logical. Every time I think you're going to go right, you don't go left, you go straight. You go just as it is so recognizable. You know, it's funny, like it is so recognizable that you understand how much Hollywood has brainwashed us to think of the world in this bizarro way that really doesn't exist. I'm curious, though, all of us, especially journalists, we're guilty. We buy these books, write a script in 30 days and make $1 million.
Right.
And they all tell us about the first plot point, the second plot
Right.
point, you got to turn this way, whatever. When you're teaching your classes, do you teach that way? Or I mean, I would imagine teaching something like this would be very difficult to, you know what I mean? To write a movie like this.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly don't teach screenwriting. I think screenwriting books are the devil. I think we should all be burned. I talk more specifically about point of view and tone. So driving this notion of how you're attracted to a story, or you have an idea for a story, what perspective are you coming at the story from? That, I think, is way more important than this notion of, plot points and twists and turns. And then tone, you're trying to, as I often describe it, you're trying to carry this bucket of water with the exact right amount, not spill any or add any. You're trying to keep that tone consistent. And so that's the way I teach it, and that's the way I think about it in terms of writing, is trying to maintain whatever point of view that I am trying to attack the story from, and in that keeping it in the right key. Those are things more important to me.
In fact, talking about that tone, it's horrible to say this can be the death note, but this film is very realistic. Mm-hmm. So much so that sometimes when you're watching it, it appears that maybe it is improvised. Was that going on, or is everything that's happening on the page?
No, it's all on the page.
All on the page.
The only things that are, we might change a line while we were shooting, or the actors are also good. They might have a suggestion. Well, can I say it this way, or if I change it to this? But no, it's 99% on the page.
I'm going to disagree with you. The actors are great. Okay, we've got the lead is Bryan Cranston from, what do we know him from?
So Bryan, he's got a new show now called Big Sky that's on ABC. That's David Kelly's new show. Before that, he was on Chicago PD. He was in The Hurt Locker. That was probably the thing that sort of got him the most notice early, whatever that was now, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then playing his wife is Nora Jane Noon.
Nora Jane Noon, yeah.
And early on, we meet them and something happens. And as I was just devastated by it, I'm watching these two actors. Now, remember, I know that the film's only cost we're saying only $200,000 to make. So when I see these two actors just working and they're so good, I thought, well, okay, prepare yourself, because these two are so good. They must have spent all the money on them. So there's going to be a drop off here pretty quick, and it's going to look like community theater, right? That's what I'm thinking. And all of a sudden the other actors come. They're all great. They're just terrific. I'm curious, Eli, we know about directors. Some directors are great with actors. Some are great with the page. Some are more technical with lighting and images. With you, with the actors, how were you able to communicate, obviously, what you wanted? And was it ever difficult this is really heavy stuff
Mhm.
to keep them kind of grounded the whole time.
No, I mean they're all so good. I mean they're just good. Like the one of the things that you discover, and even at this level, even at $200,000, um, the actors at this level, they come so prepared and so ready to work, and they've done so much research. Like Bryan is just a worker. I mean, they all are, but Bryan is in every scene, right? And
Yeah.
so he has to. The movie's kind of on his shoulders, and just watching the amount of preparation that guy does, it like just looking at his script was so dog-eared and there's so many notes on it. He's putting a full effort into it. And in terms of working with them, it's again, the only thing that you're doing, I think, Robert Altman said this, 90% of directing is just casting it well.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really good about picking the right actors, and I think I did. And then it's just most of the time you're just trying to figure, let's just point the camera in the right direction
Right.
and we'll get something really good. And there might be a tiny adjustment. There might be something like, oh, just pause a little bit, and that's it. That's all you're doing. They're really good at what they do, and you're lucky enough to capture it.
I found myself wanting to see the script. There are so few actual words spoken in this film.
Mhm.
So let's say when you're dealing with Bryan, who is in every scene,
Mhm.
you have to get so much out of a glance, out of a breath. How does that conversation go with Bryan?
It doesn't. So I mean, like, so we met about the script originally, and when we sent it to him, and he was interested in it, and we talked about it, and he wanted to know where it came from and all that sort of stuff. And then we met again during pre-production, and he and I just sat for 4 hours or something like that and went over the script line by line, scene by scene, and talked about like what I think the movie is about, what the character is going through, what each individual scene is about. And then he goes off and he does his work of preparation. There's a scene in it that it's a very simple scene. It's him and his dad driving, and it's at night, and it's after, I don't know, how should I? It's a heavy moment. But I don't have to say that to him. I don't have to say, while we're shooting, this is really heavy. You really got to feel, he doesn't need that. He knows what the moment, he's done the work of the script. He knows what the moment's about. He knows what we're shooting. And the thing about Bryan that is, well, there's a couple things. One is he knows how to work with the camera so well, because it's very difficult. The camera can turn a glance or a movement or the way you're holding your body, it can turn it into this really big sort of mawkish thing that doesn't feel right.
Right.
He knows how to calibrate so well his body and his face for the camera. And I don't have to say anything about that. He just knows he knows what key we were in, and
Mm.
he was able to stay in that key. And then the other thing that's just so fascinating about it is because it's so 180 degrees from who he is. He's a fun guy. He likes to laugh and joke and have a good time, And we were doing that throughout the shoot. We were having a lot of fun, but then he could, when we were going into one of those heavy moments like that, he could just turn it. So that's an amazing thing.
Let's talk. There is the heaviest moment at the beginning of the film. Let's leave it at that. I imagine everybody knows that's coming. We're shooting that next Tuesday or whatever. You know what I mean? Leading up to it, doing it, and coming away from it. Do you prepare them for it? Do you give them a day off? Do you try to pretend like it's no big thing? Because there's no doubt when you see the scene,
Mm-hmm.
I hesitate to say it's real. It just, how that scene plays out is the way I would imagine it could play out in real life. And it is that gutting when you see it.
So, I mean, the actors know when something's coming. Like whether it's that scene or the scene that's at the sort of hamburger stand. It was at a shot we shot at a Foster's Freeze between the two of them in the truck, which is the kind of emotional scene between Nora Jane and Bryan. they know when that stuff is coming, and so they're sort of preparing. The other thing I was going to say, with this kind of money, we can't give anybody a day off. There's not enough time. We're just rolling into the next difficult scene, and there's several of them that they have to do.
Right.
It's just trying to give them as much space as they need to get to do the work.
Yeah.
Just because, like, emotionally, to be able to, you got to sort of wring yourself out. Like the scene that you're talking about, Bryan was exhausted after we shot that scene, and his voice is gone after we shoot that scene. And so it's trying to do it well, trying to give them enough space to do the work, trying to do it. We don't want to do it in so many takes that they can't, like, if you do it too much, they're not going to have anything left,
Right.
know? And so you're just trying to calibrate that. And giving them the emotional space, like Nora Jane, everybody's different. Nora Jane, when we were shooting stuff like that, Nora Jane, she just needed to go off and be by herself until we were ready to shoot, just to sort of get in the right sort of place to be able to do it. Because it's hard. It's incredibly hard to do that and have it feel authentic.
Do you have to, like an NBA basketball coach with LeBron, do you have to watch load management with Bryan? Because he's in every scene, the entire film. I don't think there really is no let up. I don't want to, it's not a depressing film, but it is thoughtful, and you think through the whole film. He is thinking through the whole film. Do you have a responsibility as a director to somehow keep him healthy and well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I don't know if we did. I mean, it's 6-day weeks. It's 6-day weeks, 12 to 14-hour days each day. And I mean, you have your stuff that's easier to do. Okay, this is just a shot of you walking from A to B, right? And we're just going to have a long shot. That stuff is much easier. But there is so much emotional stuff, and there's, maybe it's because I'm a native Californian. I just find people in their car driving interesting to me, because we spend so much time in a kind of introspection that way. And there's just a ton of stuff of him driving and staring out the window. And I mean, that can get like, how do I do this and make it meaningful, but also not the same color of heavy each time, no, it was hard. I wish I could say that I found a way to take it easy on him. I don't think I did.
Yeah, you didn't go easy for this is your first feature-length film, right?
This is my first feature, yeah. So I have multiple short films that I made, and then I also have a documentary about my brother that I made. But this is the first time I did it at this level.
Maybe this is an obvious question. You were shooting in your hometown. The scenes in the church are the church you attended. Your father apparently is still a deacon at that church. It's very easy to think that this may have some autobiographical tones in it. Is that the case, or is this simply ideas that came to you as you were living that kind of life?
Yeah, it's not what I would call autobiographical, in that I'm retelling a story that happened to me or happened to my family. But it is, the shift, I guess, that the character kind of goes through. Like, I see that throughout my own life, and the way my identity changed, which was a much more gradual thing as I moved away from my hometown and went to college and went and got a master's degree and all that sort of stuff. So the shift in which I thought of myself, saw myself, and my place in the world changed. And so that's what sparked the interest in the idea for me, is seeing that reflected in a character. But even though we were talking about how maybe the movie doesn't have the typical twists and turns, I still had to invent this plot point at the beginning of the movie to generate that same sort of shift in identity that I was interested in.
Was it powerful for you, though, to be telling this story in the place that it actually springs from?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the only thing that you might say is autobiographical about it is I made a documentary about my brother, who is schizophrenic. And so there are moments in the movie with one character that are sort of borrowed from some of that experience. Like there's a shot in the movie, it's a very simple shot of this kid lying on the ground, and he's listening to music, and the camera does this very sort of slow push in towards him. that shot, I actually had to step back because it was something that I took directly from my lived experience with my brother. And it's, it does not anything big or momentous, but that was, oh, I'm tapping into something really personal with that image. And it may not mean anything to anybody else who sees the movie, but for me, there's something very, very personal about it.
The least Hollywood thing about this film is that there is no bad guy in it. You're going to see a film about someone who is having some kind of crisis of faith. You expect the religious hypocrite to show up, or the proselytizer, the loudmouth, and people would come in. I'd go, oh, it's going to be this guy. It's going to be the pastor. No, it ain't the pastor. Oh, it's going to be the dad. No, it ain't the dad. Again, those books that you want to burn, they all say you got to have a great villain.
Sure.
Did you think at all, man, this would be a lot easier to tell if I just had someone horrible in it and he could play off against that guy?
Yeah. I mean, probably at some point I did. That I think that since I'm coming from the place, I know all these people.
Yeah.
And I know where they're coming from, and I understand their point of view and the way that they would try to address a situation like this. They are just going to want to help the character. I mean, there are things in it, like I often say that I think the film is actually more about identity than it is about religion, because I'm fixated on that idea of like how we form our notion of ourself, and this is going to sound pretentious, but the internal and external discourses of identity,
right?
Where they are, how we create them, how they come from external forces, and sort of form our sense of self. And so, for the character that Thomas Francis Murphy plays, another fantastic actor and just a wonderful human being, plays the main character's dad. That's a big part of this, is if he feels his son sort of drifting away from who they are and what they are, you know. And but he's not a villain.
No,
he's a human being who feels threatened, you know, and that's a very, very common thing, you know. If his son is drifting away and he's threatened by that. So
I mean, Eli, I identify with that. I was raised Catholic. I'm not exactly certain that I now believe everything, but if someone asked me, what are you? I would say I'm a Catholic, because it is who I am. And I imagine for you, even though maybe you don't exactly follow that, this very much makes up who you are. Yes?
Yes. Yeah. No, it's still home. You know, I don't know if you saw the thing at the end, but I have a credit at the very end, or a sort of dedication at the very, very end.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's at the end of the movie, where it's dedicated to my family, and it's also dedicated to my home, because that's my home, you know. Well, I haven't lived there in 23 years, but it's still home, you know. When
was the film actually shot?
So shot in late 2018.
Okay.
Late 2018, and then we spent, you know, when you have no money, it takes forever to finish a movie, you know, right? So it took us into mid 2019 to finish. It premiered at the Indie Memphis, Film Festival at the November of 2019.
I find it interesting that we talked about there being no villain, and I think that makes the film that much more powerful, because if there's a villain, all you got to do is knock him over and then everybody's happy, like the Wicked Witch is dead.
Right.
In this case, it's a bunch of just good people trying the best way they can think of how to get along. We're all kind of dopey trying to figure these things out. This is especially, I think, interesting, given that the film was made at a time, and still, when, if you do not believe exactly as I believe, if you don't have the same opinions I have, then obviously you're the devil, you're the worst person, you're wrong, all this kind of stuff. Did that at all, as you were going along the film, was that something that you wanted to kind of portray in this, that people can struggle together, not always agree, but they don't villainize and demonize each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite movies is a movie called The Rules of the Game by Jean Renoir.
Yep.
And there's this great line in there, it's a very famous line, everybody has their reasons. And it's something that I think about quite a bit in terms of trying to craft these fictional characters, is that nobody thinks they're the villain. Nobody's coming at this from this kind of manipulative, evil point of view, right? We're all trying to just get along, kind of like
Right.
what you were saying, like do the day-to-day, live the day-to-day. And religion is one of these things that we have created as a way to do that, as a way to deal with the big and the small, whether it's a tragedy, or it's cancer, or it's unemployment, or it's a drug problem, or whatever it is. And that does not necessarily have evil intent. It's a way of trying to deal with being human. And
Yeah.
so that's the way I tried to approach the story and the people.
So let's go right from evil to money. Those seem to go together a lot. Yeah. So we talk about the film was made for $200,000. It sounded like you didn't have $200,000. Were you paying for this as you went along?
Sort of. I mean, we did not have like, it was piecemeal. Like, and we'll go back even before we got made. Before the film got made, one of the worst days of my life was we were supposed to start shooting in May of 2018. And about 10 days before we were supposed to start shooting, the producer got the call from the investor, said, "Nope, I can't do it," and they pulled all the money out. So there was a process. It was like, that was like a death. Like the movies died.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're gonna do this. And so we were able to then pull it together, piece it together. We had to make it that was supposed to be about a $400,000 movie. So we had to make it for less than half of what we originally intended. And yeah, we did not have, I mean, we're a week in and we get a little more money. My producer, Sherry, she said, "Yeah, I don't know how we're going to make a payroll at the end of the third week." And then we got another producer, Mike, was able to get some more money. So then we were going to be able to make payroll. And then as we've gone through post, we've had to pick up money here and there, little stuff on credit cards and things like that. The way to do it. I don't recommend this to anybody. Let me tell you that.
Hey, let's talk about, you teach at Long Beach City College, and you teach about a bunch of young filmmakers. Mm-hmm. I imagine filmmakers today are very different than, I'm 59, and where you had to have a film camera and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. You are probably seeing projects that are shot on DSLRs, on phones.
Yes.
How is that? As someone who's teaching, I imagine nowadays it is much more of a collaborative relationship you have with your students, because in many ways, they're kind of making it up as they go along, and they are really the innovators.
Yeah, and they get so much more practice than I did. Like I didn't grow up around cameras. I didn't know anything about film technology before I went off to film school. And I think the great thing about now, making something now, is their ability to just shoot something with their phone or with their little digital camera, whatever they have, and they can put it up on YouTube within 12 hours of shooting the thing, and starting to learn about the process. Like that was just something that wasn't available because you needed a 16 millimeter camera, you needed the money to buy film stock and the money to be able to process that film stock, and you can just do stuff now in your pocket, and with what's in your pocket. There's something great about that. Now, the bad part about that, and what I see quite frequently with my students, is that one of the things that happens when you're shooting on film is, because everything is so precious, your time is so precious, it costs a lot of money. When that camera's rolling and you're a film student, I went through this, all you're seeing are the dollar signs, so the money that's, because each frame is costing you so much money. Now, because they don't have that, what you have to do in those circumstances is we had to pre-plan. You had to think through everything. Now everything is a bit more disposable, and so there's less pre-planning, and I think that they suffer because of that. I think pre-planning and pre-visualizing is so crucial for the process.
They're just hoping the magic happens.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they don't want to spend the time, because the planning takes time, and there's nothing when you're planning. There's nothing at the end of it until you actually get to go make the thing. You've just got to plan, and so that's less satisfying than just going to make the thing.
Have any of your students seen the film?
No.
Oh.
Now we were able to bring a few, there was 3-4 of our students who came up and they got to intern. They got to work in camera or lighting grip. And that was really great for them because it was their first experience on a kind of real sort of professional set. They got those first couple days, they kind of got their head spun a little bit because it's just so much different than student sets. It's just, it's so much more fast and furious. But no, they don't want to see it until it's in their finished form. So no, none of them seen it now. I assume they're gonna see it in the next couple of days.
We were talking about it. It premieres Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it can't premiere in a theater because of what's going on. And of course, even at home, you can't really have a bunch of people over. How are you going to celebrate? What are you going to do on Friday?
Boy, that's a really good question. I hadn't even honestly thought about it.
Oh.
I had, you just like the movie's coming out. You're trying, we're trying as best we can to get the word out as much as we possibly can about the movie. And so I'm so worried about that, thinking about that. I haven't thought about how I'm going to sort of mark the moment. Great, now I have to, I feel inadequate in my preparation. Now I got to go plan something out here.
Yeah. Speaking of planning, is there another project in the works or that you're already working on?
Yeah. No, I've got a big one that I want to do that my producers and I are working on getting off the ground. And then I'm a big, one of the things I talk about quite a bit with my students is because so much of this, as you were saying earlier, how much money movies cost and how much permission you have to get. The more that you can make stuff that you don't need permission for or that you don't need outside resources for the better, because it keeps you making, it keeps you learning, and it also keeps you connected to the process. And so I have this bigger film that I want to do, but in the meantime, once when we can safely meet together on a set, and not have all the protocols. The thing about making small movies is COVID protocols make it almost impossible to do. It's so expensive. So hopefully this summer I'll be able to make a short because I just like making stuff. And so that's something that I can do without a big pile of cash. And then this other thing, we think it might be something. So we're working on getting that off the ground too. So we'll see.
Well, I can tell you this project, as I said, I cannot recommend it enough. It's called Faith. It's on Amazon. It's on iTunes. It's on Apple. I think Google Play, ATTUverse, which Eli didn't even know what the hell that is, but it's got this film. It's about an hour and a half. It's wonderful. Eli, thank you very much for spending time with us. And really, man, congratulations.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.